So hello, welcome to another weekly vlog. This one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be talking primarily about when I worked for British Airways back in 2016. So to start off my kind of fly-in journey, as it is, I used to do telesales for a company in Milton Keynes, and I was a bit fed up of it, and I went on holiday with Dan to Fuerteventura. On the way home we had really bad turbulence and it terrified me, put me off flying altogether. So when I came back from holiday, it was my first day back in work and I was just so bored and I didn't want to be there, and I saw that EasyJet were recruiting, so I decided, oh, if I've got to lose, I'll apply for EasyJet and see what it's like to fly. So I was at EasyJet for 2 years based in Luton, and it was a really nice kind of small base. I think we had about 15 aircraft, quite a lot of crew, but we all, even though there's many of us, we all kind of knew each other, and it was more of that family orientation as opposed to what it was like at British Airways. What made it a bit weird for me is whenever I was a passenger on a plane, hated flying, terrified of it. I was even sick once on a flight to Mallorca, and me and Dan went on holiday because I was that nervous. But when I was in work, it didn't faze me at all. I kind of think my head saw it as an office, not an aircraft, so it didn't really used to bother me. But thankfully, after about a few months, that wore off, and then I was fine flying. The reason why I wanted to leave EasyJet after the 3 or so years I was there was it got to a point of I was always looking out of the window, landing into Corfu and some islands off of Greece, and it looked really pretty, and I always thought, I wonder what it's like to actually get off the plane and have a look around, have an explore, and see what it's like there, and see a country from the country itself, not from the steps of the airport. So that's why I decided in the end to leave and test out long haul and see if I liked it or not. So that's when I decided to apply for British Airways, and the application process was kind of straightforward. I went online, there were vacancies there, so I sent off my details and my CV. They went through to British Airways to be assessed, and then I got an email back to do an online test. That consisted of about 2 tests, about an hour long, and it was kind of customer focused and speaking about my experiences, answer a few questions, and then sent that off to British Airways, and they got back to me to invite me to an assessment day. The assessment day was at Waterside, which is just near Heathrow Airport, and it's British Airways head office. The day before my test, I decided to go down and stay nearby at the Renaissance, just to free up that time in the morning so I wasn't sitting on the M25 and risking being stuck in traffic, really. I thought it'd be a bit easier to do it that way. So I got down there the night before, started going over my notes, got my suit all nice and ironed and pressed, and then in the morning got a taxi to Waterside. So when I walked in, I had to go and speak to reception. They gave me a visitor's pass. The first test I had to do was a reach test. It was to see how high you can reach up, and I believe that's check your ability for closing the overhead lockers and things like that. And then they also looked at my tattoos. I've got a tattoo on my left arm, so they had to check that. I had to put on a short sleeve shirt to make sure you couldn't see the tattoo through the shirt or it was poking out underneath. Once they signed that off, it's fine. I then went into the waiting room, if you like, and there was a good 30 of us at this point, 30, 40 of us, and we all got talking, mingled with everyone else, and then we were called off group by group in groups of about 7 to do some group exercises. One of those exercises, we had to create a new terminal lounge and like a waiting area with a strict budget and the stuff we wanted inside it, and they were kind of watching to see as a team how we made it realistic and how we made it friendly and for what age bracket we wanted it, that kind of thing. So it wasn't a hard test, it was just to see how you communicate with other people and how you talk to them and how you work as a team to build a functioning area. After that exercise, we was then put back into the waiting room and we was called off for one-to-one role play exercises. And I just remember I was sitting in this room, kind of like I am now, just in a sofa, and there was a lady in front of me, and she was pretending to be a customer that had a problem, and I had to fix that problem without knowing really what was going on or what the company I was working for was or how to fix the problem. I was given an A4 piece of paper with a brief on it, and that explained a little bit about the situation and the company we worked for, and you use that brief to work out a resolution for the conflict that you're having with this customer. Again, after that's done, back into the waiting room, and we sat there for about an hour or so. It was quite a long wait, while everyone else kind of had their interviews and their role play exercises done. So as we're all sitting there talking and mingling, some British Airways staff walked up and got all of our attention and then told us to listen out for our name. They went through a lot of names. I think it was about 25 names in total they read out, and they were all taken to one room, and then we were still sitting there, and they said, everyone else who's waiting here, please come into the next room. So we both went our separate ways. The room I went into, we sat down and we was all a bit nervous, we didn't know what was going on or what they were going to tell us, and then they said, congratulations for you guys in this room, you've made it through to the next round. The other group has been sent home. We weren't allowed to say goodbye or anything, never saw them again. By the time we went back out, they were gone. So then they provided us with lunch, some sandwiches, some crisps, some drinks as we were sitting and waiting just to freshen ourselves up. And then we were called out one by one to do a one-to-one interview. And it was just basically your generic interview questions of what you know about the company, have you had any flying experience before, what's the most difficult situation you've had to deal with, and those kind of things, just to get to know the real you and see how you would handle those situations. And then after that, I was sent home. It wasn't until about 2 months later I got an email saying, you've passed, you've been accepted, your training date will be X. So we was awaiting that confirmation date of the training date. At that point I didn't know. I knew I was through to the company, but I didn't know when I'd start actually working for them. So it was all kind of left in limbo. We were asked to book in a date to go for a uniform fitting, so I had to go down to just near Hatton Cross is where the training facility is, and try on the uniform there, get my sizes, and it was trousers, top, waistcoat, jumper, quite a lot of uniform you get. And then I had to book in a date to go to the British Airways doctor to get my injections, and that was for things like, I can't remember what the injections were, but like yellow fever, there's a few other ones as well. We had to get all your injections done, they're all free, so you don't have to pay for those either. And also had to submit off my information for security clearance, so like my criminal record check, that kind of stuff. That took a while to do. British Airways pay for it, they cover your payment for that as well, so you're not losing out any money for that, but that took a while to do. Then I was given my training date, which was in January. So the training course lasted for 6 weeks, and there were 6 very long weeks that seemed to drag. There's so much you get through in those 6 weeks. There was emergency procedures and what to do in those kind of events of a ditching or a crash landing, a fire on board. Then you have your fire practical tests where you have to put on a smoke hood and go through a mock aircraft, find a fire, extinguish the fire. Those tests were really hard, and it's all about communication and how you talk to each other on the day. You're being assessed by assessors everywhere who are marking you up and getting little things about you. If you do something wrong, they can pull you up and give you points on it. So the fire test, for example, you have to don a smoke hood, go through a mock aircraft, find a fire, which is usually a candle, like, you know, the little fake candles with the batteries in them. Had to find one of those and extinguish the fire, communicate with everyone from the other crew members to the flight deck, and there were assessors everywhere watching. I think there's 4 assessors when we was doing this drill, so you're in the smoke hood, you are sweating because it's so hot, and you're being watched by everyone, and everything you do is being ticked or marked, and you're given feedback afterwards on what you could have done better, what you've done well. And that was the same for all the courses really. So there's first aid training as well, and that lasted about 4 days, learning things from someone giving birth on a plane to a heart attack, a seizure. There's quite a lot of stuff they have to teach you, especially with your long haul flying, because you spend so long over water. If you're flying to the States, for example, where that medical treatment isn't available to you unless you've got a doctor on board the plane, something like that. So you have to know as much as you can about the situation in that little training course. And then it does go on to nicer stuff such as customer service, and you study the food, the wine, and how to talk to customers, the actual service plan of how to deliver a proper service, and starting by drinks, then your main course, then dessert, then teas, and keep checking the plane, checking rubbish, all those kind of things that make a passenger's journey so much more efficient and easier, basically. The hardest bit of the training, I think, was all the aircraft types and configurations. So I was trained on the 777, 747, and the Airbus 319, 320, and 321. So for example, the 777, there's so many different configurations of that, and you need to know where the emergency equipment is for every single one of those aircraft, and the different codes you need for the aircraft, and keys. So much information you get bombarded on this last kind of week of your training. And then you have the tests, and there's so many tests as well, but finally once you pass that last test, they say, here you go, here's your wings. So you get your wings basically. It's kind of a big event. You go to waterside, everyone throws their hats up in the air, and yeah, you get your little set of wings and you get your first date of your first flight. So my first flight was a supernumerary to Manchester. Now see, I left EasyJet for the short haul flying and the quick turnarounds, and my first flight was to Manchester, 20-minute flight time, but I got to sit in the flight deck. So on the way to Manchester, there wasn't enough time for me to leave the flight deck and get back in. So I basically just sat in the flight deck for the whole flight, which was actually really enjoyable because it was such a quick flight, straight up, a little bit of cruising, straight back down. On the way back from Manchester, it was more, I had to help with the service, so I was out in the galley helping the manager. So when I got back from Manchester, me and the manager went into the airport, had a one-on-one conversation. He signed me off as fit to fly, and then I was given my first flight the next day, which was to Chicago. I'll tell you more about that next week. If you watch our video, I'll talk a little bit about my first trip, the different trips that I'd done, and the benefits that I had with seeing more of the world than I did at EasyJet. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below, hit that thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.